Okay, welcome Becky to the All Things Sustainable podcast. I am just grinning from ear to ear that you are the very first guest and that this podcast is actually getting off the ground. And so thank you for being here.
Thank you. I am so excited. First of all, let's celebrate the first podcast.
Yes.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I can't believe it's actually happening. It's been like 2 years of dreaming about it in process. And so to finally be here is so exciting.
Yeah, well, I adore you and all your work and your education around sustainable practices. And I'm just so honored and thrilled to be the first guest and excited to just have a conversation today.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah, I have already filled in my listeners with a basic short bio of you, but I do want you to be able to just tell us about yourself from your own perspective. And yeah, absolutely having you as the first podcast guest just made so much sense in my mind when I wanted to start this, because you have such a wide, I don't know if wide is the right word, or diverse background in sustainability. I feel like you know everything about sustainability within Colorado. Like you're just my go-to person whenever I have a question for like a topic that I'm looking to get into or a person that I need to speak to about something. So having you here just makes a lot of sense, I think. But go ahead and tell us about yourself, how you got into this line of work, and just, what you're passionate about. And we'll start there.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for that. And the fun part is I don't know if I know all about sustainability, but I surround myself with people who do. And I think that's the really fortunate part. I know we'll talk a little bit about that later, but just excited again to be here. And my journey is really strange. I actually come from working in events. So I've been producing events for over 20 years now. And wow. It was really this idea of working in events that I saw how horrendous it was to the environment. I would, worked mainly concerts, and I would run festivals and just see the amount of trash at the end of a festival. Or I would think about, oh my gosh, all the buses that are touring, or what's happening with, inside of a venue with waste or energy usage and all of the lights and all of the production. And all of that just started to add up in my head. And I try myself to live, personally a sustainable life. I'm passionate about it in my own life. I grew up in a family that was really about recycling, and my parents worked hard to be, sustainable practices in 1950s, right? Like that's what they knew. So it was just something that was kind of part of who I was. And to start having this realization of, if this is happening in events, is it happening all over? And it was, really fortunate for me in my path. I got into working green events when I was working in a job in Des Moines, Iowa. I got to help the local festival do some greening of their festival. In the venue that I was working at, it was a 1,200 seat theater. It was historic theater, and I really pushed to get recycling as part of the theater's programs. And we had to go through a grant process. We had to go to the Historical Society. And it was really exciting to be a part of that change and part of getting a community involved in recycling into this historic theater that had never thought about it before. And that was really where my passion started to grow. And I moved to Colorado in what year is it right now? 2013. What is time? I moved here and worked for a company where I didn't necessarily get to focus on sustainability. And I realized that that was a big part of my life. And so in 2018, I left that job and started exploring who I am and what I wanted to be. And as I got to explore myself, I got to learn about a whole community that was out there doing incredible work in sustainable practices. And this is where I said, it's really cool that I get to surround myself with people who know more than I do. But I get to really build up this community of people who were working in sustainability in all different aspects, just things that I wasn't thinking about. And it was a great opportunity to bring community together and really learn how, these people, specifically women, because we are learning that women are really doing the advocating, the educating, and the work to create sustainable practices, but they're not necessarily the voices and the leadership behind it. And so we looked at it, and I say we, I have a business partner that I had met in 2019, and recognize how can we bring this community of people together to empower each other, support each other, collaborate together, because collaboration is a huge piece of sustainable practices. And that so I created an organization in 2019 called Women in Sustainability, and we've been growing over the last couple of years. COVID actually, for most people, was a setback. For us, it was a time of growth and a time of community building. And it was just a really incredible time to really recognize that there is a need for a community of women coming together who truly care about the planet and how we can create systematic change to create a better future for us and our kids and their kids and their kids, and really thinking about future generations to come.
That's amazing. And now Women in Sustainability is officially a nonprofit, right? And so that's new and that's exciting.
Yeah, it's new and exciting. Some days terrifying. But
yes.
As a business owner, yourself, like there's a lot of hats you learn to wear and a lot of things you learn, but it is a really rewarding challenge. It's, I tell a lot of people that I get to be around every day that the community inspires me. The work that's happening and the passion and the drive that all the other members in the community have, our small business owners, our CSR directors, anybody who's in the community that is working every day to create change. That's my inspiration and that's my drive. Like that's what creates me to get up out of bed every day to try to find a way that we can really support and care for those people, because that's really important and valuable. How do we care at the end of the day for the people who are out there doing this work and working hard every day?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so much of your story really just resonates with my soul. And I think the community piece is so important for any work that we're doing. It's so much harder to do it alone. But I think that I'm going to edit this part out because I'm just taking a minute to think about my transition.
That's the best part about editing, is that you can do that.
Exactly.
I was like, oh, good thing you were in person. Like as I spit on you, edit that part out too.
Like another reason to love podcasts.
have like a blooper reel at some point.
We totally should.
I know. I kind of like appreciate it, because there's podcasts where they just go straight through, and I'm like, I can't breathe.
I know. And then it's so hard. I mean, I have my show notes right here, but like, it's so hard to still stay on track sometimes. And then to think about something that you just said that like connected with a thought. It's not necessarily on my notes because I wouldn't have known, but
you're good.
Gosh.
This is why we're doing this, right? Like this is all practice. You'll get better at all of it as you do it more and more.
Thanks. Thank you. Okay. I think so much of what resonates with your story for me is that the events for you is what was so eye-opening to how much waste was generated, and that this had to be going on in the rest of the world, right? And this had to be a much bigger problem than what we can always see on a surface level. And for myself, I know that, I was in college when I first realized that all of this recycling that my classmates and I were being so careful to divvy up in the different bins. We had a passing conversation one time with a janitor who was just talking about how, oh yeah, this entire bin is going into the trash because so much of it was too contaminated and they couldn't sort it out. And so it was just going to end up in the trash anyway. And I remember hearing it and I was immediately in denial. Like, no, that's not happening. You're wrong. And of course, this is their job. They're telling me, and I still could not believe it at first. I didn't want to swallow it. And anyway, then it sparks, looking into that more, and then realizing that that thread is connected to some other rabbit hole you can go down the internet with about, all of the islands in the ocean that are filling up with actual plastic debris, and they're literal islands. And so then one thing leads to the next, and my mind was just completely blown. I could not believe this was happening and that I had never heard about it in my entire adult life. So anyway, moving into my own professional transition from being a teacher and then entering the sustainability world, a lot of that was connected to like having conversations with people, teaching kids about caring for the earth and, plant life and composting and all of these things and recycling. And then realizing that we as adults don't even often know if we're doing this correctly. And then trying to teach it to a child was just very eye-opening. So anyway, you and I have been kind of in this world for a few years now, or more than a few years. And
time.
just time, a lot of time. And I think that we have become very familiar with certain terms now, like zero waste, or the images that are associated with that. A lot of us might be thinking about that little mason jar full of trash as soon as you hear the phrase zero waste. And I think that you and I are probably pretty good about dismissing that now as not really attainable. It's also an unrealistic portrayal of what living sustainably actually means. And then also realizing that that is not the end goal because it doesn't actually accomplish much of anything. So, I mean, if all of us could manage to have a tiny mason jar's worth of trash for 5 years, cool. Like, problem solved. But yeah, we've heard the summaries and the opinions associated with recent climate change reports and data. And I'm sure that so many of our listeners joining have also heard that to some degree. But for a newcomer who's joining this conversation, who maybe just stumbled upon this podcast and they're curious about what living sustainably might mean, or they're curious about where we're headed with climate change and everything that they hear about doom and gloom, could you speak to why change on a massive global scale is necessary? Recycling alone isn't enough. Having a tiny mason jar worth of trash isn't enough. Could you share a bit about what you know, considering the current state of our climate, and why a massive scale of change is so important?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, we originally talked about this question, and I think there could be days and days worth of conversation around this.
This is a big question I'm just throwing at you right away.
Oh, good. We're going to go right there. So kind of going back to I'll kind of address the zero waste part first. And I was kind of giggling at myself thinking, oh man, if your listeners could see my face right now, I would,
Yes.
it tells it all. But, little secret fun fact about me is trash is my favorite part of sustainability. I like to consider myself a professional trash talker. Yes, I actually note that as myself when I go out and teach classes and do conversations around it. And I love to, professional trash talker here. Call me Oscar the Grouch any day. I'll talk trash as much as you want to let me. So if any of your listeners ever want to get into a long conversation about trash, feel free to send them my way. I'm happy to talk. It. But I think it's so important because I think that's the tangible piece to it, right? Like, I think that's the thing that people can see, which is why we see so much of the conversation around the turtle, the straw in the nose, and the great big garbage patch, and all the stories that we hear about single-use plastic. I think that that's a tangible piece. People understand it, if they see it, it's knowledgeable. I think that we live, as you said, in a way that we say the word zero waste, and in what I've seen and people who are in my world who are not in sustainability, they check out of it, right? That's a word that people in sustainability use, but people outside of that bubble are like, there's no way that I can do that mason jar. That's not possible. And I think we do ourselves a disservice when we start to say that waste doesn't exist. I think right now it's what refuse, reduce, recycle, rot, and rot is considered to be compost. I actually put compost and recycling on the same line and put rot in as landfill. Because I think, again, we do our disservice if we try to put everything into this perfect box. And it, we say, oh, everything's recyclable. Everybody has a place to go. And I'm like, that's not true. Like, if we say there are things that don't go into the landfill, and then we're saying that we're forcing it to be recyclable or compostable. And so what we're finding now is this contamination, as you talked about. And only 9% of recycled goods in the United States are actually being recycled. A lot of that is because materials go to the recycling facility and they're contaminated, so they have to get thrown into the trash. A lot of it is that people just aren't recycling in general, because it is a complex world and it's confusing and they just don't want to take part in it. And it's devastating to see, because as somebody who works in sustainability, we know it doesn't have to be this way, right? Like, we can change that conversation. So I think waste is a really important place to start, and teaching people about waste, in that it has real value to it. Again, that tangibility of understanding what's happening, being able to connect all those dots of why it's important to think about what's happening with your waste. On a much larger scale than that, because that's just a small fraction of that conversation.
Right.
And then again, I will note that I surround myself with people so much smarter than me on these topics. Energy is a little complex for me. I don't have a huge science brain, so there's a lot of things that even I don't. It's complex to me, and I try to understand it. I follow the scientists, understand that we're getting warmer. Again, we can see these things, right? We're seeing the hurricanes are more intense. We're seeing more intense tornadoes. We're seeing flooding happening in interstates, where we can see these things, and we know that that's a correlation to the fact that the climate is changing.
Yep.
And I really am happy that it's starting to be a bigger conversation. So here in Colorado, 9 News, and this entire month, has been doing conversations around climate. Al Roker, I will give him props, because he almost every single day says the word climate change in his news reports. And so the conversation is starting to become more mainstream, versus before. People really try to hide that. And I think that it's really valuable that people are getting a little more comfortable. Now, are we talking about it correctly? That's a different story. But at least we're hearing those words every day. And I think we're starting to understand that this isn't a political issue. This is an issue that's affecting everybody. Climate doesn't care what side of the spectrum you sit on. You're going to be affected by it no matter where you are. You're going to be affected by it no matter your socioeconomic impact. No matter your gender, your race, everyone's going to feel it. Now, the scale in which you feel it's going to be different based on those things, but everyone will somehow be affected by climate change. And I think that just getting people to be a part of the conversation is the most important next step. Do we know all the fixes? I don't know if we do, but I think just getting to this conversation where we can all agree that it's happening, and that we need to look at the impact, not just at the United States, as you kind of mentioned, on this global scale. What is happening globally? What's happening in Europe or Africa or Asia? Like, how can we all, again, really look at interconnectedness? We are not individual. We are not separate from what's happening in other countries. We are all impacted by each other. Global economy is true and real, and we know that. And so how can we think about it in our individual lives? And I think that's where you start, right? You think about it. We both mentioned we started doing this because we saw the impacts in our individual lives. So looking at it as an individual, looking at it as a country, maybe you start with the state first, right? Maybe you start building your bubbles out, and how do you start to look at it? Because sometimes I think people look at it and they're like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm done, I'm checked out, not doing it. Right. I mean, I think you and I have had that conversation where this is our passion in our life, and we're like, yep, I can't even comprehend any of it right now.
Yes.
So I think that that's important, just to take it in strides and not to overwhelm yourself with everything happening, everything happening at the same time.
Yes. That was such a great answer. I think that when you bring up the piece of interconnectedness, that is what sticks with me the most. And I think that's what has stuck with me throughout the years that I've gotten into this, because no matter what my place is on the political spectrum, or no matter what my beliefs are, no matter what, you know, my family and friends believe or are experiencing, that interconnectedness piece is something you can't get around. And whether it's climate change or, well, the effects of climate change or the effects of living sustainably, it's either of those two things are going to impact all of us on a global level. And, this podcast pilot series is going to get into all of that. We're going to talk about, well, right now in this conversation, we're talking a lot on how this is impacting us as a planet, and we'll get more into that. But then we're also in future episodes going to talk about how does this impact our communities and on a social level and social justice issues. And then we're going to talk about how does this get into our physical health and our mental health. And then there's the whole financial side of things. And it's like within your own little world, all of this is connected. But then in your own, like you said, state, country, the world, like all of this is interconnected and we're within the same system. So I think getting at the why of this change that's needed, it's just that we're all connected and we can't just live our own lives only thinking about ourselves without it having a direct impact on others.
Yeah. And I love that you're looking at it as this community piece too, because that's so important. And that's such a, I think in COVID, we learned that it's really tough to be isolated people. We're not meant to be isolated people as humans.
Right.
And so we like to be in community with each other, but now taking that piece and understanding how that impacts our planet, how it impacts our society. And I love that you're just taking these really deep dive into all these different areas that a lot of people don't necessarily discuss. And why is that important to talk about around sustainable practices? I think that, I probably potentially could speak for both of us on this, is that as we explored our own sustainability and learned ourselves, we, specifically me, I learned how everything touches into sustainable practices and how that really, everything you do, like, oh, my money's going into a bank that's funding fossil fuels, that's, climate change. I'm like, oh, okay. So now I've got to think about how to my money, where am I spending my money? Who am I banking with? Things like that. And I think that once you start to recognize that interconnectedness, you start to realize like why that community piece is so valuable and so important.
Yeah. And then just the same as like we both had that aha moment with recycling or, all the waste that was being generated. It's just once you know something like that, you can't think differently. You can't go back to the way that you were before when you were completely oblivious and just kind of blissfully ignorant. So I feel like all of this, the whole interconnected piece, it's just very eye-opening. It impacts you on a deep level. And for each person, that might look different. It's not always going to be, recycling that really gets to somebody first, or, maybe it's going to be a social justice issue that leads into an environmental connected piece. And it all just has like a domino chain effect from there. But yeah, I think let's go to kind of back to the climate focus, because we're going to get into so much of these topics in the future episodes, and I cannot wait for all of it. But I feel like right now, the top questions that I often get when I'm talking to people about what I do for a living or just why this is even important to me, the top questions are usually something like this. Do individual actions even matter when it comes to climate change? Or isn't all of this actually in the hands of the big corporations that are responsible for generating the most waste or pollution or whatever it is? isn't that in their hands or in the government's hands? And what can I as an individual really even do? Something along those lines is typically what I get. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that for a bit. Um, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I think you had a good point a little bit earlier that I want to kind of circle back to real fast, is that everybody has their own connection to why it becomes important. And everybody has to go on their own journey, right? Everybody has to find that piece that's important to them and take that journey in their own steps and ways. Nobody has the same journey no matter what. But I think another thing that we don't probably highlight enough is that some people, the word climate change is overwhelming, and it's not a word that, again, it's a politicized word. So thinking about it sometimes in terms of your health, right? Like, what does your health look like? In Colorado, we experienced, fortunately not this year, but last year, really bad wildfires, and people couldn't even be outside for weeks on end because of the fires were so bad. And that was our safe haven during COVID, right? Being outside. So
Right.
I think sometimes it's just acknowledging how does it affect us personally, and then taking those baby steps to the bigger. And I love this conversation around individual and versus, companies, versus policy. There's lots of people who think, well, it's one or the other, or it should be this way and not this way. It all matters. I'll say that again.
Yes.
It all matters. Every single piece. We need everybody doing everything, but we don't need people doing it perfect. We just need people talking and doing and being a part of the conversation. So, I think it's hard because going back to the recycling piece, I think this is an easy way to people to understand, is that for the longest time, recycling has been companies create a product, consumers consume that product. It's now their consumer's responsibility on how to properly dispose of that item, right? So individuals, the message has always been, how do individuals, they're the ones that are responsible ultimately at the end of the day. But that's not true, right? So we're changing that conversation a little bit more. We're starting to say, companies need to start taking responsibility for the items that they are manufacturing and how to probably dispose of them. A term that may not be familiar to some of your listeners is circular economy. Extended producer responsibility is part of that, that we're starting to see in Colorado, is something that I think we'll start to see policy across the board in the United States. I think we'll eventually start to see it in general. Hopefully someday go into our federal House and Senate. But it is the idea that we can create a product that at the end of its life, at the end of its use, can go back to a place easily and convenient, accessible and convenient, right? Like, I think that's the key word here, is that we make right now recycling so difficult for consumers. And so it's really hard for people to figure out how to properly dispose of their items. So accessibility is a huge piece of that. Like, how do we make it easy, convenient, accessible for people to dispose of that item that then goes back to a manufacturer that can then integrate into a new product, and it stays in the circular sphere. And then, I think that we're starting to see more conversation around that. We're starting to see people talk about how do we create products that we don't, how do we refuse things? How do we find things that are already in existence and reuse and repurpose? And for the companies to recognize and realize that matters, it takes individual action for that to happen. And so individuals, and we've said it so many times, it's because we found that we started to care. We took that initiative and that passion to start creating change, but that conversation is part of it. So companies listen to individuals because we are their consumers, and they are going to listen to us. So if we start demanding and start saying we want better products to be created and better ways to dispose of our items, manufacturers are going to start to listen. In order for that to change, policy has to come into place, because there's a lot of policy that has to change in order for us to be able to create the circular economy. So all of it and we've said this word so many times, but I think that this is sustainability. All of it is interconnected.
Yes.
Everything matters. Every single piece matters. All of it. So even though sometimes as individuals, I think we get so frustrated because we feel like all the responsibility is on us to create that change, and that we're the ones that have to think about, if we're going to get a clean planet, we have to do all the work. I don't think that's true. We just have to keep the conversation going, and we need to have the conversation with the companies that we invest in. Our dollars matter, where we spend our dollars, how we spend our dollars. We need to get involved in advocacy. I think this is a big piece people forget. When we vote our legislators in, we voted them. We are their constituents. They listen to us. And so you have a voice with your legislators. Get involved and get active with, if there's something, a piece of policy that you want to get active in. If that's not someplace that's comfortable, some people just aren't comfortable with that, that's okay. How can you at least stay in the conversation to help create that change? So everything matters. All of it matters.
Exactly. Yep. I totally agree. So then I think on the flip side of that, because the top questions that I get that I first presented to you are, does this even matter? And then I think on the flip side of that, the other questions I often get are, well, it all matters so drastically. We are in a critical time in our lives. The world is ending, kind of heated perspective that will come out. And then there's the weird, like, so if it all matters so much, but I can't possibly do enough quickly enough, then what? And I know that that's a very big question that, gets posed to me. It's a big question that I'm sure gets posed to you all the time. So there's not a perfect answer for this, but I guess, where is the hope in all of that for you? Maybe speaking just with your own personal experience, how do you still find hope in this conversation and in the actions that you're taking on a daily basis as an individual? And then, with the thousands of other individuals, for example, through Women in Sustainability, that you're seeing all the time. Like, we're all working together. We're all trying to do our best. But yeah, what about the flip side of that question?
Yeah, that's, I actually had lunch with a state legislator not too long ago, and we were having a conversation, and at point blank, she stopped and looked at me and said, do you think we'll be able to create change in enough time? And I looked at her and said, I don't know. The truth is, I don't know. I don't know the answer. But we have to remain hopeful. We have to remain hopeful that we can create the change, at least get people to be a part of that conversation. And I feel a shift coming, and I think a lot of it is because I stay in this bubble, and I see it every day, but conversations with my mom has changed. My parents are starting to try to get interested. Now the education they're getting from is a different story, but again, seeing, hearing and seeing it on the news more often, seeing commercials, seeing people who are outside of my conversation starting to get involved in the conversation. I had brunch with a couple girlfriends one day, and she said, I went and bought reusable produce bags because of you. And I was like, I didn't do anything. And she's like, but you do, like, you taught me, like, I see that waste now. I see that, So I think there's a lot of eye-opening happening right now. I think people are understanding. We're starting to connect the dots, which is part of that important piece. I think for me personally, are there days I get exhausted and I don't want to do this anymore? Absolutely. And that's really truly why Women in Sustainability got started, because I was working in my office home alone, and I would go down these deep, dark rabbit holes of climate change, and I would find myself getting super depressed and having this super run of anxiety. And I would quickly find somebody who was doing sustainable practices, and I'd set up a meeting with them, and I would go and talk to them, and I would find that hope and energy again. And I found that cycle happening in my life. And that was how I ended up building a community that I built around me. there are days that it's exhausting, and it's okay. Like, if you need to take a break from all of it, it's okay.
Yeah.
We've talked about it multiple
Mm-hmm.
times in our friendship over the years of how just sometimes you just need to not think about it for a day. You need to step away from the news. You need to go outside. And for me, that's my reminder of why I do my work, right? Like, I go out, living in Colorado, we have this gorgeous state and these beautiful mountains, hiking trails galore. And I get myself out on a trail and I connect back with Mother Nature. And when I do that, I remind myself, this is why I do this work. This is why I continue to do the fight. But I allow myself to have those moments of being exhausted and tired and grief, anxiety, and that's okay. And then the other piece of that is finding yourself a community. I've been really I can't even begin to tell you how fortunate I feel every day to be surrounded by the community that exists with women in sustainability. And it truly is the driver, because while one day you may be exhausted, another person has the energy to help carry us forward. And having these conversations as a community and having a bigger support group is just really important. And so, I'll always come back to that tie that community is what is going to create our change going forward.
Yeah, that's so beautiful and so necessary. I'm really glad that you brought that up. I think I'm going to pause again. What do I think?
You think a lot of things.
I think a lot of things. I know. I'm like, how do I hold on to one of these thoughts and then move back? Oh man.
You actually did good. I was like, because Chris walked in right behind me and I was waiting for you to.
No, I was like,
I wonder if she's gonna hear the door opening.
No, I saw him walk by, but I'm like, these are the joys of living at home. Elliot is making noise downstairs, and I'm like, I don't know if that'll come up in the podcast or if it might be too far away, but
yeah, I can't hear him. So
we roll with
speaking of the devil.
Oh man, let's see.
Is there anything specific you want me to touch on that? I don't know if I'm answering the questions how you.
Oh no, you are.
Okay.
No, you totally are. You're doing fantastic. It's like this weird balancing game of like, I've got, my show notes and trying to follow a certain trail, but also thinking through like, I don't know, just what we're talking about. I'm like, is there some other direction we could go?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Take a moment, collect yourself, your thoughts.
Thanks.
Chris is gonna make my pizza.
Oh, awesome. Okay. I think I'm probably going to start transitioning into that last, like the routine final question, and then we'll wrap it up. So we have covered a lot of ground, a lot of a very vast topic that, like you said before, could take days and days and days, years and years and years to really get into. And honestly, that is my goal with this podcast, right? We will keep this conversation going. I have so many ideas for future episodes that I'm just banking right now. And I'm excited to get into all of these topics, but at a much deeper dive, getting into all the nitty-gritty details and tangible steps that we can be taking. But that's going to take some time. So for this first episode, I think I want to introduce a routine question that I am hoping to bring into every episode, no matter who I'm talking to, whatever the topic is. But it's just really the teacher in me that's coming out, because you and I have talked about this a lot too. Education is empowering, and it makes all the difference genuinely in anything in your life. So, there's that quote, when you know better, you do better. And with the do better part, I think that's where I want to focus right now. So how do I want to word this? there are a million things that people can be doing to live sustainably. And everybody is going to take different actions. We're not going to be doing exactly the same thing. And like you said, we don't need everyone to be doing this perfectly or following some like standard routine of sustainable living, but we just need everybody to do the best that they can. And their starting point is also going to look different than somebody else's. And we're not all going to have access to the same resources. We don't all, unfortunately, have the same level of privilege granted to us. So, considering all of those things, what would be the top 1 to 3 actionable steps that you would recommend our listeners can take related to living sustainably and related to climate change or this whole interconnectedness piece that we've been talking about? If you could just pick 1 or 2 or 3 that could at least give our listeners some kind of hope and some kind of tangible action that they can hold on to after this episode, what would that be?
Yeah, this is such a great question. I love that it's going to be kind of a standard question that you plan to incorporate.
Mhm.
I know you've been on women's sustainability webinars. We do kind of that same wrap up question. And I think it's really wonderful to kind of hear the different answers. And,
Yep.
I just was thinking back to one of our first conversations of, you know, how, how do we, how do we create change as those people? And
Mhm.
I think both of us have always talked about the zero waste concept of, this isn't real. And I think really the biggest advice I have for people is finding what is passionate for you. Because if you're not passionate about it, then you're not going to want to get involved and want to keep driving that change, because as we mentioned earlier, just a few minutes ago, it's exhausting some days. And some days it's really hard to just say, okay, I'm done, I'm walking away. So find the things that matter to you. Start in your household. For me, it was waste. I started thinking about, how does my waste look like? How do I change that? And then I went into my kitchen and I think about cooking. So we meal plan and we work really hard to eat our leftovers, and we think about, how does it look like when we order out? What restaurants are we supporting? So start small. Start finding the things that that you can change and that you can do and that you're passionate about, and then start to build up from there. And I think it's one of those things where 30 days creates a habit, right?
Yeah.
And the Japanese culture it's 30 days. So what seems really challenging at the start to do, all of a sudden, when you continue to do it, it becomes natural habit. Grocery bags, for example, when I first started using my reusable grocery bags, I would get done with my shopping, realize I forgot my bags, and I would leave my cart and I would walk out to my car and I'd pick up my bags and then I'd go check out. After 2 or 3 times, I stopped doing that because I didn't want to walk out to my car anymore. And I was always afraid somebody was going to take my shopping cart. It looked like a good shopping cart. Maybe they wanted it. I don't know. But create those habits, create those small habits and build up. And remind, for your listeners, I think remember that it doesn't A, happen overnight, and B, that you're going to make mistakes. Even for myself, who has done a lot of these practices for years now, I still mess up too. Especially because we live in a society that doesn't make it super easy to make, less waste in our lives. And some days are really challenging and hard. I think that, if there's a day where you're just like, I have to go get this takeout food and it's going to be all in styrofoam. So, okay. So what if that's easier for your day and that makes you happy and that's, and you're supporting a local business? Great. Go for it. Like,
there you go.
Recognize that you don't have to live perfectly sustainable every day. You can do the best you can and recognize that some days are going to be more challenging than others, and do the best you can on that day too. And then maybe the next day when things are better, do a little bit better. I think there's that balance and not judging each other. I think that it's really important to understand everybody's on their journey. And when somebody is having a tough day or somebody's in a different situation, understanding that we're all just trying to do the best we can, and we're all trying to live the best we can. And if somebody wants to be a part of the conversation and is at least trying to create change, then great. Let's welcome everybody with open arms to be a part of it, and recognizing that tomorrow's a different day, and we can all do better tomorrow, and as we all grow, and as the system around us grows. That's where that individual care impact comes, is that as we start to create it and we're tired of having to do things ourselves, we push for that change on a more corporate and federal level with policy. So just do the best, just do the best you can, and then I'll just lastly say, get involved with the community. Find a community that you feel passionate about, that you can go and have these conversations with. Maybe it's one area of sustainable practices. Maybe it is, maybe it's just a community that meets up once a month over coffee and just talks about what's happening in the world. Whatever you feel comfortable with, just get involved. I'm a little biased. Women in sustainability is the best, but it's not for everybody, and I get that. So just be a part of the conversation and keep the conversation going, and share that conversation with your community then, and why that's important, and understanding they're in a different place. When I talked with my mom, I understand she's not where I am with sustainability, but she's interested. And that's all I need, is to have that interest, so that we can have that conversation together and we can communicate about it. And recognizing that we all can really truly get to a place that we can talk to each other. I think that that's going to be really valuable in how our future looks.
Yes, that is fantastic. I think that is the perfect place for anybody to start. Anybody can start there, right? No matter where you're listening from or what you have access to or not, you can start there. You can just figure out what part of this conversation you are passionate about, and then go from there. Start exploring it, start learning more, plug yourself into a community, and start making those small adjustments into your life, doing the best you can, and being gracious to yourself when things don't go as well as you wanted them to, or you're not able to because of something that is out of your control. And then talking about it. I love all of those actions and those suggestions that you just named. And I think that it's the perfect segue into the rest of this podcast, because I named it All Things Sustainable because I want to talk about everything related to sustainability, but it all needs to be sustainable for you and for me and for our listeners. Otherwise, it is not going to become a habit. Like you said, if it takes 30 days to stick with something and actually develop that habit, if you can't do it, if it's not sustainable within your own life and routines and your family's needs, that's just going to weigh you down and make you depressed and frustrated, and it's not going to be progress. So thank you for saying all of that. And throwing in one more plug for women in sustainability. It has been a life-saving community for me throughout COVID. Honestly, the past couple of years have been so hard and so isolating for all of us. And that community has been there in any capacity that I needed it to. It's definitely a great place that I recommend all the time, and will do so on this podcast. But how can people follow up with you and with Women in Sustainability? I'll link all the different contact info in the description for this episode, but yeah, how could people follow up with you or with Women in Sustainability?
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, so honored to have you a part of our community. The conversations you bring are so valuable, important. The education you bring is so valuable, important. I think your listeners are going to be in for such a treat with this podcast. And I personally, as a listener, am so excited to listen to the journey and go on this journey with you and your listeners as well. I think that, you have such an insight into so many of these topics, and I'm so thrilled and excited to take that dive with you as well. So thanks for bringing this to light. As for Women in Sustainability, you can go to womeninsustainability.org. is our website. We have all of our events that'll be listed there. We'll be announcing our 2022. Whew. Like seriously,
this is gonna be a tongue twister all year long.
Yeah. I'm like, because I still don't even think that it is like the holiday season. I mean,
I know.
for your listeners, we're taping this currently the week of Thanksgiving in 2021, and this year flew by. So it's hard to imagine. And it's 70 degrees in Colorado in November, which is really strange. So my brain's just not here yet. Anyways, 2022 events will be announced soon. We also have a Facebook group. It is under Women in Sustainability Colorado. We are currently launching our first chapter in Colorado. We hope to grow nationally, in the coming years. You can go, we got all the social medias, Instagram, women.in.sustainability, LinkedIn, and regular Facebook as well. So just, my ask always is join the conversation, just be a part of it. What's really cool about Women in Sustainability is that there's a different subject that people are posting about and talking about every day. And, maybe you don't know where you fit into the sustainable world yet, but be a part of that conversation. And there might be something that just lights up, that inner energy, that you might learn about a little bit more, and they might, and you as your listeners, find that excitement. So just be a part of the conversation. That's, I think that's the most important first step.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you so much for creating a space where people can do that. And I'm so excited to continue recommending that to all of my clients and now my listeners. And I'll have all that information linked in the episode description. But I think this conversation has been fantastic, and I can't wait to continue it with you and with so many other people. So thank you for joining me, Becky.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled and honored again. And just can't wait to see how this podcast develops. So proud of you.
Thank you. Me too.
It's going to be amazing.
Thank you so much. How do I stop the recording? Oh, here we go. It's up here.